Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. For my next topic, I'll be returning once again to the subject of military surplus small arms in media. This time, however, I want to explore how early and mid 20th century small arms contributed to an unusual space and genre, fantasy and science fiction, particularly from the 1960s through to the present. I'll discuss why I believe this occurred and how these designs have influenced fictional media over the past 60 years. My interest in military surplus developed through a variety of sources, including fictional media. One of the more unexpected influences was science fiction and fantasy. I've been thinking about this connection for some time, and I wanted to explore it in more fully here. Specifically, how milsurp design strongly contributed to the visual language of fantasy and science fiction weaponry. Much of what I'll be discussing is based on correlations and personal observation rather than hard evidence. These are conclusions I've drawn after consuming a wide range of media. This is a broad topic, so I'll be breaking it into several parts. I'll begin by discussing the prevalence of military surplus weapons in the media following World War II through the 1980s, then examine how this availability influenced weapon designs throughout the latter half of the 20th century, and finally, touch on how these influences persist or fade in modern media. A large portion of the media we consume takes place in fictional worlds, storylines, or fantastical settings. Even so, creators frequently draw heavy inspiration from the real world. Unless a creator deliberately sets out to construct an entirely new system, many fantasy worlds still follow familiar historical and mechanical rules. As a result, fictional weapon designs are often inspired by or directly lifted from real weapons. This makes practical sense, as real-world weapons were proven to function, and those same designs translate naturally into the fictional settings. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll focus specifically how on early and mid-20th century military small arms contributed to the design language and culture of fictional firearms, especially in the latter half of the 20th century. First, I want to discuss the prevalence of early 20th century and mid 20th century small arms in late 20th century fictional media. This trend has clear roots in real world circumstances and continues to influence media to this day, as we'll see through this presentation. To begin, let's focus on the origin of many of these movies in the United States. Compared to many other nations, the US has historically had a unique relationship with firearms and military surplus. Firearm ownership has long been widespread, and while certain groups were restricted in the past, by the 20th century most citizens could legally purchase firearms with relatively few barriers. Because the United States has both a large population and a strong interest in firearms, many countries have sold large quantities of surplus military weapons to the American market. As a result, the US has inherited military firearms from a wide range of countries, including Britain, Soviet Union, China, much of South America, Switzerland, parts of Africa, and France, among many others. One particularly important source of surplus for this discussion is the importation of captured weapons following World War II. After the war, large numbers of German, Japanese, Italian, and other captured arms were brought back to the United States. Massive stockpiles were seized and emptied. While official policy varied, there are some accounts, particularly regarding Japan, suggesting that individual service members were allowed to bring home a limited number of war trophies, perhaps two, while the remaining weapons were destroyed or dumped in the sea. Even so, a substantial number of captured arms made their way into the U.S. From the post-war period through as late as the 1990s, the surplus of World War II firearms was generally cheap and plentiful. As a result, it was not uncommon to see these weapons in the hands of private citizens, revolutionary groups, criminals, hunters, and others during this time. This leads to the first major point. Early 20th century military surplus had a significant impact on late 20th century media. World War II firearms frequently appear in fictional representation. German, Japanese, and Italian weapons in particular are commonly seen, alongside American surplus, such as the M1 Garand and the M1 Carbine. These weapons were likely popular film productions because they were affordable, readily available, and visually distinctive. As a result, in crime films, blaxploitation cinema, adventure stories, and science fiction movies, it is common to see props based on World War II firearms. From here, we can move beyond grounded depictions and into more fantastical settings, where World War II and pre-World War II surplus began influencing fictional weapon design itself. At the same time surplus was widely available, the fantasy and science fiction genres were gaining momentum. While these genres existed earlier in pulp fiction and comics, they reached new heights with major film franchises in the late 20th century. In science fiction, especially, many weapons are designed based on pre 1950 firearms. In early entries of major franchises, a wide variety of surplus arms were repurposed into futuristic weapons. These firearms were chosen not only because they were affordable and abundant, but also because of their distinctive silhouettes, added texture and realism to the fictional worlds. Their warm mechanical appearance helped sell the idea of a rugged, lived in future. This influence extends beyond direct adaptations. Even fictional pistol designs that aren't tied to a specific real world firearm model often resemble early 20th century handguns in shape and proportion. Similarly, many fictional rifles, carbines, and light machine guns borrow heavily from real surplus weapons, sometimes blending features from multiple designs. Moving into the present, science fiction and fantasy firearms have evolved once again. Today, many designs no longer resemble real weapons at all, instead favor exaggerated or highly stylized aesthetics. However, some legacy franchises have preserved the older tradition. Certain modern productions, particularly those made by creators deeply familiar with earlier entries, continue to incorporate military surplus designs or direct analogs. Interestingly, this older tradition seems to persist most strongly in Japanese media. From the 2000s to the present, early 20th century firearms still appear with some regularity, often wielded by flamboyant villains or standout characters. These weapons retain a sense of character and visual flair that continue to resonate. In conclusion, early 20th century firearms had significant influence on fantasy and science fiction weapon design throughout much of the latter half of the 20th century. Because these weapons were so common and accessible after World War II, they became deeply embedded in media representation. As surplus firearms grew scarcer and more expensive, their presence in media gradually declined as well. In the future, I'd be interested in seeing more of these military designs from the past, returning in fantasy and fictional settings. If you'd like to see more analysis on small arms and military surplus, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you.